grateful to all our speakers, especially Mr. Shaukat Tareen, who is the pioneer of consumer banking in Pakistan. He is advisor to Chairman Silk Bank Limited. He has also served as the former Federal Minister for Finance and Economic Affairs. Our keynote speaker is today Dr. Musaddiq Malik. He is the Minister of State and a spokesman to Prime Minister of Pakistan. Mr. Khurram Rahat is the moderator of conversation with Mr. Shaukat Tareen in the inaugural session. He is the Managing Director, Teradata for Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Our opening speaker is Mr. Paul Keijzer. He is the CEO of Engage Consulting, Malaysia, Pakistan, and UAE. Our today's moderator is Mr. Ahmed Jalal Malik. He is the CEO of Aman Foundation. Ahmed Jalal has spent 18 years abroad and returned to Karachi to be the CEO of the Aman Foundation, one of the Pakistan's largest private foundation dedicated to sustainable impact within healthcare and education. A journey he describes as from London to Korangi. His experiences have straddled private, public, and social enterprise sector, and due to his record of public service, he was awarded the Harvard Kennedy School's Emerging Global Leader Award. Prior to that, he was an executive director with Goldman Sachs in its investment team. He was the managing director of Abraj Group, where he held investments for the Global Healthcare Fund. He graduated in BSc Economics from the London School of Economics. He is a chartered accountant from the UK and has MPA in International Development from the Harvard Kennedy School. Mr. Ahmed Jalal, please conduct the further proceedings.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's indeed a great pleasure, a great honor to be on the stage with such an august audience. Shaukat Tareen Sahab, of course, needs no introduction. Honorable Minister Musaddiq Malik, Paul Keijzer, Mr. Mirza Ikhtiar Beg, and Mr. Khurram Rahat, as well as in the audience. I think we've got Mr. Zafar Khan, who's an icon of the industry, Zubair Tufail Sahab, who's the new head of the FPCCI. So it's great pleasure for me to be here. It's also a lot of pleasure for me to be amongst practitioners of human resources. HR एक ऐसा area है जो everyone thinks they understand it, they know it. Everyone wants to control it. When it works, it's as if it doesn't exist. But a lot of time when it doesn't work, then everyone complains about it. It is a very difficult job. It's someone, the HR professions that I've worked very closely with, and I completely empathize with the hardness, with the toughness of the challenge. It is ultimately about human emotions, it is about human life, and yet it is about process, it is about systems. And when you try to combine emotions with process, sometimes people don't understand that, and that's something that, of course, a lot of HR professionals, particularly in countries like ours, always struggle with. So when Asfar Bhai, is putting this audience together, the HR professionals and the CEOs, he asked me to moderate, to set the frame, share some ideas which hopefully some of the speakers can throughout come to the day. So I thought that this is not about HR. We had just listened to the national anthem. Ultimately, anything and everything we do in our space, in our public and private space, is about Pakistan. It is about actually the development, the progress of Pakistan. I'll share some stats with you. Pakistan, in terms of a human development index, ranks in the bottom 21% countries. And there's some pretty lousy countries out there, and yet we are in the lowest 20%. In terms of gender inequity, women who represent 50 to 52% of the population of Pakistan, the gender inequity, we are bottom 22%. And female workforce participation is about 24, 25%, which is much, much lower. So clearly, there is a lot that needs to happen. I think the first area that needs to work is, and all of us are responsible as HR heads, as CEOs of large corporates with a lot of people. So if all of us can develop the human capabilities within our ecosystem, which is our companies, जिस तरह होता है कतरा कतरा मिलके समुंदर बढ़ता है और दरिया बनता है, I think if we can build the human capabilities within our organization, Inshallah, we can, through that, build the human capability of the whole country and really transform Pakistan. And I think that is what is at stake. It is just not the HR of our organizations. It is the human development, it is the human progress of Pakistan that is at stake when we talk about HR. I'm just going to mention two facts, which are important trends. And these are not predictions, this is the order of things. Some of you may get worried by those trends. Some of you may be excited by those trends. So I'm going to tell you which are the 6 largest corporates in the world globally. 6 largest. They're Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Facebook, as well as Berkshire Hathaway. These are the 6 largest companies in the world. 3 of them did not exist 20 years ago. So these are companies which are grown up to become scale companies. 3 of them were not there only 20 years ago. They represent, these 5 companies, software companies, represent $2.5 trillion of market cap. What is their median age of employees? Can anyone guess? 30s, very close. Median age is only 31. I would not ask for a show of hands for the median age in this room, but what it tells us is that the world is being forged, the world is being created by people who we call the millennials. And they're very different from us. They're even I work with millennials, all of us work with them. It's very frustrating and yet exhilarating to work with them. And yet they are very important, and to harness them and to understand them, I don't think we do enough of that. And I think that is a trend we need to be wary of. Another very important trend I want to talk about, there's something called the S&P 500 index. The S&P 500 index is the global 500 largest companies. It is what I would call in Pakistan the establishment of global corporate enterprise. Once you are in the S&P 500, it's like you have arrived. You are the big boy, you are the 800-pound gorilla. In 1960, the average age, the average life of a company on a S&P 500 was 60 years. So once you get in there, pretty much you'll stay there. You know, it'll take you 2 or 3 generations on average, and then maybe if you make a mistake or something like that, you'll come off it. Guess what it is in 2010? How much an average company stays on S&P 500? It is only 18 years. 18 years, all of us can remember what we were doing 18 years ago. It is nothing in the life of a corporate, in the life of an institution. It's like you barely get in there, and there you go out. So what does it tell you about HR? What does it tell you about systems? What is going to happen? I believe that we are in a very exciting time of human evolution. The last time that it happened was about 250 years ago, was when the Industrial Revolution took place. And mankind moved from Middle Ages into the Industrial Revolution. We are going from industrial to a digital revolution. And I think there are key lessons and the key HR implications for both CEOs and HR professionals. Number one, which is, I always say, and someone I worked for, Mr. Arif Naqvi, he always says that, today's peacock is tomorrow's feather duster. I think if businesses are not dynamic, if they don't work hard, you cannot rest on your laurels and imagine and hope that you will continue your success. Because it's a time of exponential change. The first lesson that we have for us, for both CEOs and HR, is that we got to keep moving, got to keep innovating. Secondly, and I think this has wider implications across Pakistan, that the traditional sources of power, what were the traditional sources of power? Land, property rights, paisa, or number of people. These are traditional sources of power. If you have a lot of people, if you have a lot of land, if you have a lot of money, you control resources, you have a lot of power. This will change. The source of power is going, because all of these companies that I've talked about, they don't have hundreds of thousands of people, they have literally tens of thousands of people. It is not the quantity of your human capital, it is the quality of your human capital that matters. Quality. So what does it mean for HR systems, for corporates, for organizations, for bureaucracy, for government? I think what it tells us is that we are entering into a time, and that's where the role of HR is very important, that systems, organizations, people that promote merit, that allows merit to prosper, that allow an open, transparent system for people to have transparency and visibility, for inclusive and diversity, different people coming together, not closed systems, they will be doing very well. But add to that one more mix to it, one secret ingredient, and which is mission. I think we don't talk enough about culture, we don't talk about mission, we don't talk about those things. And I think if you add to merit, to transparency, diversity, a sense of purpose that all human beings search for in an organization, we have a secret ingredient. I'll just tell you, so that I think is the role of HR, to build systems which are transparent, to build systems which are merit-based, and to build good values and good culture. And similarly, organizations that concentrate power in a few hands, they're non-transparent, and they operate on a command and control basis, they will be challenged by those more open systems. While those open systems will become more dominant, these organizations will fall. I think this means there is increased importance of HR systems that promote merit, transparency, openness, particularly in VUCA times. HR heads are the custodians of the process, the HR systems. The CEO is the custodian of the values of an organization. And I think both of them have to work much closer together in order for organizations to reach their potential. I think we have a great panel today, and we have an amazing line of speakers. Some of them are going to talk about these points that I've mentioned, and I think we have no one better than Paul Keijzer to talk about some of these points and to share some of his experiences. He is from Erasmus University in Holland, and as a Dutch person, I'm sure he is an avid cyclist, amongst many other things. But what he is passionate about and dedicated his life to is HR and building HR systems. We know Dutch are very structured people, and we need that structure in Pakistan. We need that structure in our HR systems. He has been a veteran of Unilever. And what's most amazing is that he went to Vietnam and he went to China in 1990s, which is an area which was much closed, an area which was very different, didn't have capitalistic norms. And so we are very pleased to have with us Mr. Paul Keijzer to share some of his experiences and to help us understand better talent management in VUCA times. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Paul Keijzer.
Thank you. All right, let me see whether I can get this microphone to work. And somebody was going to give me a clicker. That would be awesome. Thank you for having me. Also, thank you for inviting me. His Excellency, thank you for being here. Valued guests and dear friends. And I guess there are quite a lot of dear friends in this room. Thank you very much. I was reminiscing a bit with Asper that I was here at the first HRM Summit in 2003. And at that time, I just came fresh from the boat from Vietnam. Oh, that's, I think, a TV series as well, isn't it? I came fresh from the boat from Vietnam and arrived in Karachi. And I've now just started my 15th year in Pakistan. So I was explaining to this to a driver that picked me up in Islamabad airport to drive to Telenor. Telenor was one of my clients, and he asked me, Paul, what are you doing here? So in his 3 words of English and my 1 word of Urdu, I explained that I've been here for so long, that I'm married here, have my local practice. And he says, Paul, I understand. You're a Desi Gora. So I've been wearing that button with a lot of pride ever since. So yeah, when I go to a hotel and I order room service, I actually order chicken karai rather than a hamburger. So that's how localized I've become. What I would like, when Asfer asked me, Paul, would you like to speak? I told him, Asfer, I've not been speaking on any of those conferences for I think now 4 or 5 years, because I thought you got fed up with me. But when he told me that it was all around managing talent in VUCA times, I got excited, because that's very close to my heart, and that's also something that I'm aiming to write a book about very, very, very soon. But I've taken the liberty to change the word VUCA, because apart from 150 people in this room, not a lot of people would understand what VUCA means. So I've called it Managing Talent in the Age of Acceleration. And I've picked up that quote from a gentleman called Thomas Friedman. He's a New York Times author and a columnist, and he's one of my favorite writers. And his ability to translate very difficult concepts into simple ways in explaining how the world works really attracts me. And in his latest book, which is called Thank You for Being Late, and I leave it to you to buy the book and understand why he called the book that way, he talks about how 3 tornadoes are currently hitting Earth. And those 3 tornadoes at the same time are all around acceleration of change in technology, in environment, and in interconnectivity. And I will go through each one of those 3. And what you see at the moment is that because of the acceleration of that change, a lot of people feel being left behind. And a lot of the changes that you now see in the world, I think you can easily bring back to these 3 accelerating forces. The first one, and sorry for the small font, but the first one is all around acceleration and innovation. And somewhere behind this chair, it starts with the printing press, and it goes all the way to what we're doing at the moment. But it took I think it took 38 years for the radio to achieve 50 million people audience. It took TV about 14 years to reach the same 50 million audience. Internet, it took 4 years. Facebook, it took 2 years. WhatsApp, it took 6 months. So the pace of change, pace of acceptance is really heating up. I don't know whether you know, but Google answers 1 billion questions every day. 1 billion questions. I sometimes wonder, who was answering those questions before Google? Yeah? Those questions were still there. Who was answering them then? I haven't got a clue. Yeah, so all these 3 changes in technology has got a huge impact on how we live in the world today. And my son, I've got a newborn son. I'm a proud young father of a 6-month-old. And I just realized that probably he doesn't have to learn how to drive again. Because 18 years from now, we will be having self-driving cars. So my 6-month-old doesn't have to learn how to drive. I must say, I'm going to be very excited to see how a self-driving car manages Karachi traffic. Well, that's a different conversation altogether. So change is really, really wrapping up. And there are 3 parts of the technology that has done that. One is to do with the sheer power of microprocessors. Yeah? And all of us have now in our pocket a computer that is more powerful than the first supercomputer of IBM, which is mind-blowing. And the speed of microprocessors has for the last 40 years been able to consistently keep up with the famous Moore's law in which it doubles every 20 months. And the CEO of Intel tried to explain that in a little bit of an analogy. And he said, if you would apply the same progress that we've made in microprocessors and apply that to a VW Beetle from '71, that Beetle would be able to drive 450,000 kilometers an hour would do 500,000 miles on a liter of petrol and would cost only 4 cents. That is the progress that we've made over the last 40 years in terms of microprocessors. But it's not only been microprocessors, it was also about the speed of data. And now I am now able to get 50 MBs of speed in my home, and I'm so happy. I still remember when I came in 2003, do you remember what you have to do? You have to call up, what were they called? Dial-up. There was one provider at that time in 2003 in Pakistan. Yeah, Cybernet. Oh my God. And if you try to do a Skype, well, Skype was just around the corner. If you try to do a Skype, it will never happen, or voice over internet. Now we're getting 50 MBs. And at the same time, the amounts that we are able to store on hard disk and on other mediums has really exploded. And all these three things has then allowed us to have, sorry, you can't see the pun line of the joke. Your head is in front of the pun line. Aswar? There you are. So all those three things then allowed us to have this concept called the cloud, and in which we actually don't have to own anything. We just can use it whenever we want, wherever we want, at any time. So three huge changes are happening around technology. At the same time, you see an acceleration, a tornado hitting us around the environment. 2016 was the highest registered global average temperature on this world. That was beat 2015, who was the next highest ever. And that, of course, was beaten by 2014, who was the next highest ever. So for 3 years in a row, temperature has been rising and accelerating. And a lot of people might say, hey, Paul, climate change, what do you talk about? Well, if 99% of the scientists say that climate change is real, and 99% of the scientists say that it's caused by human activity, you explain it to the inhabitants of Maldives, whose country are going to be the first one to disappear from this globe if you don't do anything around it. And it's not only temperature, it's also the decline of species. Over the last 40 years, we've seen a significant decline in the number of biodiversity around the globe. So far so that even our iconic polar bear by 2050 will be extinct. Yeah? The third change is all around global connectivity. This is the map, the Facebook interconnectivity map in 2010. This is it in 2016. And you literally see lighting up the globe, yeah, of people that are really empowered. The only thing that you still a gap here is China, where of course Facebook is not allowed, other than people having VPN services getting onto Facebook in Shanghai. And as a result of this interconnectivity, we've created hyper-empowered individuals. Hyper-empowered individuals that can do tremendous good, and of course also tremendous bad. But we also created a platform in which, hopefully, through global collaboration, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later, global collaboration, we will be able to resolve the biggest problem that this globe is facing. So all these three changes are happening at the same time. And all these tornadoes are hitting the ground at the same time. And a lot of people say, oh, wait a minute, I can't handle this. Yeah? I long for the years of the 50s, where everything was stable, or the 80s, or the 90s. And you see a lot of turmoil now happening around the world, because actually the transition is so fast that there are a lot of winners, but also a lot of losers. And the people that are not able to adapt quickly enough feel that they get disconnected and long to the past. There are different ways of doing it. My answer to that is not to crawl back into your cave. Yeah? I think the only way to take it forward is to actually help people to learn faster and to lead them in a smarter manner. Because if 3 tornadoes hit at the same time, you can build a wall, but that's not going to do anything. Yeah? You can run away, but probably the tornado will be slightly faster. The best thing that you can do, and I use that analogy, is to actually find a way that you can stand in the eye of the storm, because only then you can actually focus with the pace of the tornado and move forward. So all these three things have a tremendous impact on politics, geopolitics. Every morning I wake up with the most ridiculous, well, sorry, if any Trump supporters in the room, my apologies. But with the most extreme policy proposals. Yeah? It even goes so far that Holland, where I'm from, which one thing I'm really proud of Holland, or was the level of tolerance. And Holland was known for that tolerance. But at the moment, a complete nationalist is leading in the polls and looks like to govern Holland. And I can't even imagine the Netherlands being in a state where they want to ban immigrants. It's absolutely unbelievable. Yeah? So there's a tremendous amount of change happening. Also in business, there's a tremendous amount of change happening. If you would have said 10 years ago that bank CEOs would be scared of telecoms, nobody would have believed you. Yeah? Now it looks like that some telecoms and fintech startups are actually going to turn around the business model of the banks. Yeah? And I promise that every CEO here thinks about how, not only CEO but also in government, how can we digitize our social services, or the services that we provide to society? How can we digitize our company? And those are a tremendous amount of challenges around here. And of course, it has also a significant amount of impact of the future of our work. Because organizations of the past were like independent institutes that were able to grow and build a hemisphere around themselves, where organizations were all around command and control. Let's follow this flow, and as a result, we get things done in a systemized and organized manner. Organizations of the future is going to be all around ecosystems, in which actually the different players in the different companies will feed off and live off each other, and which the actors in these organizations will be like networked and collaborating with each other in an interdependent fashion. So what does all this have to do with how do you manage talent in the age of acceleration? And this is where I'm gonna switch gear a little bit. So introduction of what's happening around the world, explaining the VUCA concept, and then specifically, how does it impact talent? And when I talk about talent, I don't mean specifically all your 6,000 employees. I specifically focus on the top 15, 20% of your company who really deliver the added value in the strategic work. So those are the ones that you have to ring fence. Those are the ones that are going to create the value for you going forward. So how do you manage talent? And in order to explain that, I want to talk about talent in a slightly larger context. Because talent is not just about that superstar who's on your payroll. Yeah? In my view, talent, you can also attract talent by actually partnering with other companies, having joint ventures, or doing projects together. You can actually get talent by borrowing it from consultants, temp agencies, or suppliers. You can even bring outside experts in as talent, yeah, for a short time that they bring in specific capability. And then the most extreme one, you can also open source talent. Yeah? And I'm going to talk about crowdsourcing in a little bit later. So for me, there's 6 things that you have to do in order to manage that top 20%, to ring fence the top 20%. You have to do 6 things to manage them. First one, each one of us, whether you're in the line or whether you're an HR person, has to be a perpetual talent scout. You have to throw out the HR playbook. You have to treat talent as partners. Make sure that people continue to adjust and be at the forefront on skills that are required. That you use technology to engage talent. And that you provide, like Emmett mentioned, that you provide all your constituents for a reason to be part of your ecosystem. Yeah? Let me just go through them. So the first one is to be a perpetual talent scout. The actor Rob Lowe said that 90% of movie making is all about casting. And I would be surprised if any of you would disagree. Jim Collins famously said, get the right people on the bus. Yeah? That was the first and foremost thing that you have to do as a leader. And as a talent scout, you really have to make sure that you're out there. Whether you're a line manager, a supply chain manager, whether you're a brand manager, it doesn't matter. You constantly have to be on the lookout, understanding what skills are going to take your team forward and make sure that you connect with people. Not just to recruit them in your company, but maybe to borrow them from somebody else. Or maybe to use them as a freelance expert to work for somebody else. So it's not just about bringing them on your payroll, it's all about how can you use the ecosystem to bring the right talent in your organization. And I'm lucky enough not to just be a leading engaged consulting, but I'm also the principal consultant of RBL in the Middle East, in which I'm very luckily exposed to probably the best minds on leadership and HR in the world. And Dave Ulrich, who is the founder of this company, was here in August, and he's been dubbed the stepfather of modern HR. And two of the best minds of RBL wrote this book, Agile Talent, which is all about how to source and manage outside experts. So it's not just about how you manage experts that are on your payroll, it's all around how you manage people that you bring in for a certain short period of time and bring them into your company. And they came up with 6 reasons why you should use Agile Talent. The first 2 are very traditional. Okay, let's reduce cost and let's reduce our legal exposure. But the other ones are much more to do with giving you access to expertise that you don't have, increases the speed of getting things done, challenges the conventional way of doing things. But last but not least, I think nowadays the best talent don't want to work for companies anymore. Yeah? Because if I speak to millennials, like was mentioned, they don't say, Paul, I don't want to do what you did for the last 30 years. I'm not interested in going to office at 8:30 in the morning, coming home at 6 or 6:30, listening to a boss, following a job description. I'm not interested in boring meetings. I say, I'm not going to do that. I don't know how many of you have got 18 or 20-year-olds. Yeah? How many of you have got 18 or 20-year-olds as kids? Yeah? Are they saying, I want to do exactly what you do, Khaled? Absolutely. They say, no way. Yeah? They say, I want to do work where I can make an impact, that challenges me, that I can use my creativity. I want to work whenever or wherever I want. Don't put me in a box. Yeah? I want to do other stuff. And I call those millennials, I call them skillpreneurs. Those are entrepreneurs of their own skills. Yeah? So they're really driving their desire to make an impact and constantly improve their own skill base. So one day they work for the World Bank for 3 months because they say this is a very exciting development opportunity and it gives back to the society. Then ICI will have a project for them for 12 months and they say, wow, this is a great opportunity for me to add value as well as learn. And then they say, well, after 12 months they say, oh, enough of corporate stuff. Let me go to join this startup because I really like what this guy's trying to do. They're not looking for long-term careers. And you might say, Paul, what nonsense, this is Pakistan, this is not Holland, this is not the US. But I promise you that if I talk to a lot of corporate companies at the moment, they've got huge difficulty filling their IT vacancies. Why? Because the best IT minds don't want to work for companies anymore. They want to work maybe for high-flying IT companies, but also they want to work for virtual workspaces like iDesk and Freelancer. Do you know that Pakistan is the 5th largest earner on any of those websites? And the good thing about a virtual workspace versus a physical workspace is there's no discrimination. So women earn more on these websites than Pakistani men. Yeah? Interesting concept. So it is happening. And maybe it's not happening for your bank tellers, but it is happening for the 20% of people that really going to take your company from where it is at the moment and still be in the Karachi Stock Exchange top 100 5 years from now. Yeah? And it's those individuals that you really want to make part of your organization. The last concept is this concept of crowdsourcing. Yeah? You can now crowdsource everything. Money, talent, ideas, knowledge, tools, design. I can crowdsource anything that I want. And a wonderful example of crowdsourcing is that I came across is this Canadian mining company. And you say, Canadian mining company, what do they do with crowdsourcing? So this CEO, he was Rock McEwen, he was called. He had this problem. He bought the rights to these number of blocks in Canada to look for gold. And he got all the seismologists, geoscientists, did all the survey data to find where should we mine to find the gold. And they were being very unsuccessful. So they kept on at it, and after some time, actually the company hit a roadblock. They said, we've almost got no finances anymore. So he decided to do something very different. He said, I'm going to put millions and millions of dollars of proprietary knowledge, I'm going to put it on the internet. And at the same time, I'm going to put out a competition in which he said, I give $600,000 to the individual or team who comes up with a suggestion on where I should mine, where should I dig for gold. And 4 out of the 5 top entries, they actually dig where they suggested, and they literally struck gold. And this company moved up from $100 million to now worth $9 billion. And they crowdsourced all their data through a global competition. So everything is, don't let yourself, so the moral of the story is, don't let yourself be limited to the boundaries of the past. Yeah? Because everything is out there. So, one of my favorite ones that you have to do with that top 20% of talent is to throw out the HR playbook. Please, please, stop writing job descriptions. Stop doing learning need assessment. Stop doing performance yanking. It doesn't do anything to these guys. They're not interested. You have to find a way to engage, motivate, reward, and retain them by policies and systems or tools that are user-friendly, fast, very intuitive, and very interactive. Okay? Anything else is not going to work. The other thing that you have to throw out is your manual, because most manuals are actually written to control people. And the whole thing about controlling people is that actually out of your whole employee base, 95% of the people you don't have to control. They will do whatever is right for the organization, but there's 5% of people that will misuse that policy. So we write this whole big fat policy book for people that are all about trying to misuse it. The funny thing, of course, is that those 5% are smarter than you, so they still find ways around it, where the 95% of people are straitjacketed. Yeah? So my advice is throw out the policy handbook and actually replace it with 10 words. Act and decide if this is your own company. There's one disclaimer, and I've borrowed this disclaimer from the company Netflix. And the disclaimer is that you can only do this if you hire, reward, and tolerate only fully formed adults. Yeah? Because otherwise it's not going to, only then you can understand that with freedom comes responsibility, rather the other way around. And that's a problem. Because in majority of organizations, the relationship between the boss and the subordinate is still being described as what I call from a parent to child. The benevolent dictator. I know what's best for you, my child. Yeah? You should go to this training course. You should wait for 2 more years before you get a promotion. You should do this job because it will be great 5 years down the line. The talent that we're talking about is not interested in these answers. Yeah? You really have to start treating people like partners, like adults, in which they take responsibility for their actions and in which you guide people on how to take it forward. And there comes the whole coaching and mentoring part into play. So as a line manager, it's not all about that you help explain people why something needs to be done and what objective you want to achieve, and let the how be done by themselves. Only then can people really commit to the task, can actually deploy all of their creativity. And I recently was reading this quote that nowadays is not about thinking inside the box or thinking outside the box. Nowadays it's all about thinking without the box. Yeah? So it's about having a completely wide space. The fourth one is all around lifelong learning. If you graduated in the 80s, and like myself, some of us have, and you had a 4-year MBA degree, you could basically sit on your educational laurels and don't have to worry about having to go back to school again. But the half-life of knowledge, which is the value of, the value of knowledge that will be reduced by 50%, the time in which the value of knowledge is reduced by 50%, is shortening and shortening and shortening. I promise you that skills, HR skills that are relevant today were not relevant 10 years ago. And that's only accelerating. So it's only going to be 3 years from now, only a few of the skills that are relevant today are going to be doing anything there. I just spoke to a lady from IBM who's doing a thesis on HR data analytics. If I have to ask, she had big difficulty to find people who know anything about HR data analytics. I promise you, if in 3 years' time you don't know anything about HR data analytics, you basically stop being part of HR. Yeah? So it's all about lifelong learning. And with that, I don't mean that you would go to that you go back to university. I don't mean that you go to a general management course in Harvard and pay $60,000 in order to bring yourself up to speed. What I mean with lifelong learning is finding these nano moments, these small moments for an hour, for 2 hours here, 1 hour there, read a book here, read an article, participate in a conference, constantly looking and soaking up new information and trying to make sense of it. Americans spend they found out that Americans on average spend 4.5 hours on their mobile phone. 4.5 hours. I probably do as well, but it's pretty mind-blowing. By the age of 21, an average youngster would have played 10,000 hours of video games. 10,000 hours of video games. So how do you engage talent that is on their phone playing video games? Not through long emails, not through excruciating town halls. You have to use technology. You have to use technology to give them feedback, to set objectives, to share ideas, and to build a community. Sheil Niazi and myself have just set up a new venture that's looking into this, and it's all about how we can use technology to engage people. So we're very close to our launch, so I'll let you know at the time what comes out. But it's a huge opportunity to actually really approach and engage talent in a very different and cost-effective manner. And the last one is all about looking for meaning. And I think it was just mentioned as well. I think the one thing that will help ground and anchor people through these acceleration of changes is to be very clear that they want to be part of a very clear meaning. And for me, every company should have a massive transformational purpose. A purpose that's audacious, a purpose that can cause significant transformation, and something that explains the why. As Simon Sinek says, why do you exist? And why should anybody care? That is for me what really would be a magnet for talent, for investors, for customers. And who doesn't want to be part of companies like this, with a massive transformational purpose like any of those four? Again, you would say, Paul, this is beautiful. Eh? These are all American Silicon Valley companies. Pakistan, I'm running a sugar mill. What do you mean with transformational purpose? Yeah? But it is possible. Yeah? I'm working for one client, Tamir Bank, and one of the reasons that I love working for them is for this purpose, because it really connects to me. Yeah? Empowering societies by banking the unbanked. I think it's the main reason while a lot of the best talent in Tamir Bank is actually, and Tamir Bank and Telenor is actually working for them. So, these are my 6. Be a perpetual talent scout, throw out the playbook, 3 talent as partners, provide lifelong learning, use technology, and look for meaning. This is not for your whole talent base. This is specifically for the 15-20% of talent that you need to continue as a company to transform and to be in the eye of the storm. Yeah? And you would say, Paul, things in Pakistan will be slightly slower. I actually tend to disagree. Yeah? I've been here now 15 years, so I know. Yeah? I think we are very good in adapting to change, extremely good in adapting to change. Yeah? And certainly with the economic, we're now gaining a bit of traction in terms of economic growth. You haven't seen anything in Pakistan on the war of talent that's going to be unleashed over the next 5 to 10 years. So my strong advice, if you don't do any of these, be one of the first ones, because if you don't, you won't find the talent that helps you transform your company and be in the center of the storm rather than digging a wall or hiding in your cave. Thank you very much.